So the last few videos we've talked about basic timing principles. We talked about the vacuum advance and then mechanical advance and total advance, and now we want to talk about curving the distributor. So this is like where the magic happens for a hot rod. So, and this is also one of the areas where modern computer-controlled cars have a distinct advantage, because the timing curve is infinite. It's not controlled by mechanical means. So you can, let's say, off idle when you first hit the throttle, you can give the engine 50 degrees of initial and then bring it right back to, like, in the 30 or so range. And then once the engine hits 4,000, 5,000 RPM and volumetric efficiency is maxed out, you can start bringing the timing back and you make power up there. So, and there is an old school method of doing that. I'm going to show you that at the end of the video. So let's just talk about timing curves as they apply to the average street strip car. And unfortunately, we're going to have to use gross generalities with this. And that's because there are so many different configurations of distributors and styles there's so many different ways you can go about this, that what you're going to have to do is just take this basic information and then apply it directly to your distributor. You have to do your homework, you have to do your research, and find out what parts are available for it, what the accepted practices are for the exact type of ignition that you have. But I'm going to use these Chryslers to illustrate the point, because the principles are the same across the board. Just the details of how it's done on any given distributor is what's going to change. And of course, the easiest ones of all to work with are the General Motors distributors that have the advance weights right on top. You take the rotor off and boom, there's your advance weights and springs and everything else. So those are easiest. Chrysler's the second easiest. You got to disassemble the distributor to get to it. Fords are a little tricky, but you'll have to do your homework and figure out exactly, imports too. I mean, this works across the board for any centrifugal advanced distributor. So you just have to do your homework and figure out what works for you. So from the factory, almost every distributor is equipped with a heavy set of springs. And what these springs do is it allows these weights, these centrifugal weights, to extend at a certain RPM and advance the timing. They move the top half. Remember, the top half of the distributor is hung from but not directly attached to the bottom half of the distributor. So as these advance weights move out, it'll rotate the top half ahead of the bottom half, and that's where the timing becomes advanced. So there are three basic phases of curving a distributor. Back in the day, back in the old days, every speed shop, every good speed shop had a distributor machine where they would plop your distributor in there and plot the curve based on, your engine's particular needs. But again, we're talking about gross generalities. So let's just talk about three basic phases, and then you go ahead and apply it to yourself. So the first phase, and this is for basically a stock engine, stock cam, maybe headers, maybe a carburetor and intake, tight converter, tight gears, relatively heavy car. The first step is just to get the advance to come in sooner. And this distributor right here is a pretty good example of it. This one here has the stock advance weights, but these springs have been replaced by lighter ones. So this is about the same as the stock one you'd find there, but on the Chryslers there's the light spring and the heavy spring, and in this case the heavy spring has been replaced by a lighter heavy spring. And the purpose of this, again, as RPM comes up, is to allow these weights to come out and rotate the top half of the distributor into an advanced position. They sell kits, they sell advanced kits that will again, you could tailor it to your specific needs. But the advanced kit generally consists of a lighter set of springs than the stock ones. Now, what we used to do back in the day, and I still do on my own cars, is just eliminate the one heavy spring. Just dig in there and pop it off. That's it. That's all you got to do. Leave the lighter spring. And now what happens is, right off idle, as soon as the engine starts, the weights will start to advance out. Remember, these are linked by a plate that isn't on here right now. So that's why you can pop one spring off and leave the other. but these will start to advance at a lower RPM and give you full centrifugal, let's say in like the 1500 to 2000 RPM range. Now, the second phase of doing this is where you get into lightening the springs and then limiting the amount of advance. Now you can see on this distributor, this one, the slots, here's what it looks like stock. Again, so here's that tie plate, and you can see the slots are stocked, unaltered. And the first step with doing this, now this is when you're going from just a mild tune to you've got a cam in the thing, you got some bigger headers in it, you really, you need instant reaction, right? So what you would do here is you would, the first step would be to advance the weights to approximately that position, and you would want to fill the part of this slot with weld. So you could see right here, I can't do two things at the same time, but the area between this pin and the slot itself, you would want to fill out with weld to bring it to approximately there. And now what you're doing is you're limiting the total advance, or the centrifugal advance. So this is what's going to happen is when you drop the distributor in, time for total advance, so let's say you want 36 degrees total. You want it to come in quickly, so you put lighter springs in it, and then you don't want it to go all the way back to, let's say, 8 or 10 degrees initial. You want it to only go back to around 20 degrees initial, because remember, cam, low RPM cylinder pressure, you need advance. You need this thing to go as soon as you hit the gas. So by going to the lighter springs, it allows the weights to come out quicker, and by limiting this slot over here, if you drop this in at 32 degrees and you limit this to about half, which is like around 12 to 15 degrees total advance, that means that you'll drop the distributor, time it for total at, let's say, 36 degrees, and then when it's relaxed at idle, you'll have about 20 degrees. So that makes the car really snappy. As soon as you touch the gas, bam, she wants to go. So that's like stage 2. Stage 3, this is where angels fear to tread. This is basically a full race distributor. So I'll go back to this one here, and you can see that it has no springs on the weights at all, and these slots are welded completely, right? And what that does is this distributor is locked. Whatever you drop this thing in it, let's say you drop it at 36 degrees, well, that's what you have at idle. This has two effects. The first effect is that when you step on the gas, this thing is a beast. It's a snappy, I mean, night and day over let's say a curved distributor or a stock distributor. I mean, you're talking instant go, right? And even the engine will idle with that, like, the intensity. People kind of look for that, you know what I mean? But the downside to this is that the advance is going to be all there when you go to start it. So what will happen is you turn the key, and this thing's going to try to tear the nose off the starter. As soon as that thing goes to light, it'll rotate a couple times, and then as soon as it goes to light, it's going to want to kick back hard. Now there are two ways to combat this. And there's the method that I've always used, and then there's one that's just generally accepted as the way to go. The one that I've always used is simply partially flood the motor before you go to start it. Especially when it's hot, when the motor is warm. Pump the gas 3 or 4 times. Hold it about a quarter of the way down. As soon as you touch the key, bam, she's going to light. If it doesn't, by any chance, repeat that process again, because if you don't do that and you don't hold the throttle partially open, it's going to want to kick back and tear the nose off. The more accepted way to do it is to add an ignition switch. So you'll have the key where you're going to rotate the motor, and then a separate way to kick the ignition on. So this way the engine's already spinning when the ignition hits, and they'll start immediately like that. 95% of the race cars out there are set up just like that. That's why you have a separate start button, instead of just a regular key. You have a start button and an ignition switch, so that you can start an engine that's fully loaded with advance right at idle. So that's that. Now we talked about old school method of tuning, and this is real old school. This was the Bill Jenkins trick, okay? And I use this. I've used this on many cars. We use this on Bottle Rocket actually. And what you do is you take a dual point distributor like this one. There's going to be a lead set of points and a trailing set of points. The lead set of points is going to open and close first during the rotation, and then generally speaking, as this is just about to close, as this set is just about to close, this set is just about to open. Now normally they're going to be fed like this through these two wires, and they're going to be joined, and this is going to go to your negative on the coil. What you do is you run these wires through a switch, so that this way you separate them, so that this way you can toggle between one set of points and the other set of points. Or basically low RPM, you can set yourself up for, let's say, 36, 38 degrees, hit it hard right off the line, and then when RPM comes up, the volumetric efficiency engine peaks at around 4,000 or 5,000 RPM. Every engine is a little bit different. At that point, you can retard the timing and pick up a bunch of power. They vary from distributor to distributor. I've seen them with as much as like 12 degrees, and I've seen them with as little as like 4 degrees difference between the opening and closing point. And like the pro stock guys and the modified eliminator guys back in the day, they would actually re-drill the breaker plate to put the second set of points exactly where they needed it to be. It's old school science, but it's essentially duplicating what they're doing with today's fuel injected cars or computer controlled ignitions. So that's it for basically distributor tuning, curving a distributor. Oh yeah, one other thing I wanted to point out. Now I don't know how it is on other distributors, but what I found is when you do lock out one of these distributors, like I've done with this one here, and you weld these tabs completely solid, do it with the rotor in the full advanced position. So in other words, like when it's at rest, the tabs are to the inside, and when it's fully advanced, they're to the outside. And what you want to do is bring them all the way to the outside and weld them up from the center out. And the reason for that is because the phasing of the rotor, where the rotor is phased in relationship to the post on the cap, that's where it's optimized. When they engineered the distributor, they had intended it to be operated, let's say, at extended speeds at like 3,000 RPM, and so that's where the rotor phasing is right about perfect. So that's why whenever you do modify the advanced slots on a distributor, always do it biased towards the advanced side, because the phasing to the contacts in the cap is going to be more accurate than if you just left it at idle. So that's it. I hope you got something out of that. I'll see you tomorrow.